we weren't going on saying we are the experts. We're going to ask the dumb, stupid questions that everyone's thinking. We had what I like to say is a fuck it moment. People around me say that like they are scared of failure, which is why they don't try and do things. Whereas I prefer to try things. If it doesn't work out, then I pivot. Bitcoin is code. Bitcoin transfer, let's just say, from London to El Salvador and then back again. And we did it in about 15 seconds. Holding cash was like having a melting ice cube, and that value is just dripping away. We're about how can we make this relatable to individuals, but now businesses.
Hi, Jordan. Good to see you. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Alan. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Now, Jordan, I'm really grateful that you had a chance to come in and meet with me today. You and I have spoken a couple of times before. The first thing I want to say is you are officially the youngest entrepreneur that's ever been on this podcast, because you're still in your 20s, right?
I am indeed, yeah. 28.
Good man.
Yeah.
Good man. Well, that's a good start. That's a good start. Now, you and I got to know each other a bit over the last couple of months, and I think it would be fair to say you're quite high profile in your community. But for those who don't know too much about you, I'd like to go back to some of your sort of earlier days, because you're certainly on your own entrepreneurial journey right now. You hail from the same part of the world as I do, but fill us in the blanks and the details. What's your sort of entrepreneurial journey to date? What's brought you here today?
Yeah, so it starts probably. So I went to university up until 2018. So when people ask me, what did you do before what I currently do? There's not that much of a gap in between there. But before I started my company at the moment, I was working in a startup with one of my friends. So it was a dog food company called Bug Bakes, and I was doing marketing for them and helping them through. They were on Dragon's Den actually, so helping them through the marketing process of being on Dragon's Den and just getting that exposure from national TV. So once I had done that, I started a podcast, and that's what really started me on my entrepreneurial journey. But it's always been in my family as well. Like,
You come from an entrepreneurial family?
yeah, very much so. My dad had his own business growing up, so I would. I wasn't going to tell this story, but I will. So yeah, growing up, I would. He had a carpentry business, and I would. During the summer, I would go and work there all summer and make these bird tables,
Right.
but then sell them in the shop. So making these, selling them in the shop, and like he taught me a lot around like actually putting in the work, and then being able to sell something at the end of it. So it's doing that, and then my sister as well. She started the world's largest free startup accelerator. So I guess that kind of helps.
It's definitely in the blood, and I love that, working with your dad and learning the craft of the actual work and activity. The importance of hard work, but then you got to go and sell the stuff as well.
Yeah, that's the tricky bit.
Yeah. Usually it's the hardest part.
Yeah.
But it's great at a young age you were learning all that.
Yeah.
And I love the Dragon's Den connection as well. We've had over the last couple of years a couple of actual dragons on the podcast as well, and various people who've pitched to Dragon's Den. So it's a good connection to have. So that's a great start. So fast forward, let's just get into it. Tell us, what's the business now? What are you building? What's it all about?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you where this came from was back in 2020, the end of 2020, just coming out of the pandemic into 2021. And I'd always had a fascination and invested in cryptocurrency as a whole since 2017, really. um, then kind of lost interest in it, and then sparked up again in 2020. And me and my brother-in-law, we were very interested in all of this and learning. It was more about learning about it, um, and we wanted to document our journey.
Hmm.
So that's when we were like, okay, let's start a podcast, and we can actually take people on this journey with us. We
Yeah.
weren't going on saying we are the experts. Listen to us. It was we're going to ask the dumb stupid questions that everyone's thinking,
Yeah.
and wants the answer to. So we got the experts on to
Right.
answer our questions. So that we started that podcast that started doing really well. We got quite a few big sponsors for that, which then allowed me to. I went and lived in Mexico for 6 months
Cool.
and
Yeah.
traveled a little, just podcasting and asking these experts around what what is cryptocurrency, what is Bitcoin, and then on the podcast we had am I allowed to swear on this
Of course you
podcast?
are. Crack on.
We had what I like to say is a fuck it moment.
Okay.
We were always looking at America and talking about America. They're doing this, they're doing that when it comes to Bitcoin, when it comes to cryptocurrency. And we're like, oh, well, should we put on a conference in the UK? And we've done this live. There's a podcast out there, don't know what number it is, that's like we're saying this. Like, should we do this?
You just like having a conversation, but you've got an audience tuning in
Yeah,
and listening in real time as you're
it,
coming up with this idea.
exactly. And
Love it.
then we put the episode out, and some sponsors reach out to us and was like, if you guys do it, we'll back you. Um, and then we put it out to some speakers, like very, very high profile speakers in the space.
Yeah.
And we just emailed them and was like, if we did this, would you come? And they all said yes. They all said, you don't need to pay us anything. We will
Brilliant.
fly over. Uh, and at this point, I was still in Mexico. And this is where the company was kind of formed, because we
Right.
were, or it kind of took off, is wow, okay, we potentially going to be putting on a large scale event in Scotland. So I had to fly back. We had to build the team out. By this point, the conference was snowballing into what became the UK's first major Bitcoin conference.
Yeah.
In 2022, we had just under 6 months to go from a standing start to putting this conference on. And we didn't really have any events experience.
No, it was just an idea you came
It
up
was
with for
an
the
idea,
podcast.
and we just had to start rolling
That's
with it.
amazing. Yeah.
So we had to form a team around that, and then this is the point when we started to only focus on Bitcoin rather than the cryptocurrency industry as a whole. And from there, from doing this conference in 2022, that's when the company was really came to life, put the Bitcoin Collective on the map, which is the name of the company. And we've just been, it's been peaks and troughs, I would say that.
Yeah.
Up and
Welcome to business life.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
The roller coaster.
It's
Yeah.
very much a roller coaster, but then you've got the added volatility of the price of Bitcoin as well.
Right.
When you're trying to run a Bitcoin company with the price of Bitcoin fluctuating so much, the interest on Bitcoin goes up and down massively.
So it's directly correlated with the price.
Massive. So if you
Price goes up, everyone wants to speak to you. Price collapses,
yep,
quite.
it's very unfortunately that's the way it is.
Yeah.
It's changing a little bit now,
Yeah.
the landscape, but that's what it's been like over the past 5 years. And if you look at the numbers on my podcast, you will see they are directly correlated with price. The number of listeners go up as the price goes up, and then
That's
vice
amazing.
versa with the way down.
That's amazing. I just want to say now, congratulations for doing that, because just listening to you, and obviously I didn't no idea about that backstory. You kind of, it's like what I call that building in public. You had
Hmm.
an idea, but because you had a podcast, you were testing things, and I guess you just had that conversation and you put it out there and people responded to it. And people might not have done, you might have got no response. People said, sounds interesting. If you do it, we'll back you, we'll support you. So I'm a big believer in the idea of just doing mini experiments. I'm going to try something. If there's no interest, if there's no customers or clients, that's fine. The market and the world will quickly tell you if you can get traction or not. Clearly, the market told you there's something in this, so go to the next step and go to the next step. So that's great, what you've done, and that's a very entrepreneurial
Hmm.
thing to do. You kind of, I mean this with respect, you were making it up as you went along. Yeah,
100%. We didn't know what we were doing.
yeah, but
And
that's the beauty of
that
it.
was
Yeah,
that's the fun of it as
yeah,
well. So we had to employ people that did know how to run
for sure.
events.
Yeah, get
um,
some grown-ups in the room.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. uh, but yeah, you're right. Like it is trial. It's been a lot of trial and error. Um, and that's what I kind of like. I'm not scared of failure, which is a lot of my people around me say that like they are scared of failure, which
mm,
is why they don't try and do things.
yeah,
Whereas I prefer to try things. If it doesn't work out, then I pivot.
for
The
sure.
amount of times that my company's pivoted is yeah, quite a few
Yeah.
over the years.
And I can tell you there'll be a few more to come. Just to let you know. Let me just backtrack a little bit. So you got a business that's called the Bitcoin Collective, and I'm going to sort of dive into all the detail about that.
Mhm.
But this is clear. This is not a Bitcoin podcast. This is a podcast. The audiences are primarily, SME business owners, entrepreneurs, or people who want to be entrepreneurs and people who are trying to scale companies and all that. So why, just the starting point, obvious question, but why would any one of those, entrepreneurs and business owners even be interested in this thing called Bitcoin?
So the world is changing fast. Like I like to say, like the only constant is change.
Right.
Um, and one of the fundamental things that is changing is the way that we transfer value between each other and the money that we use today um, is changing because there is it's clear that something isn't working and something is broken. Um, and I think you've had Joe Bryan on the
Yeah,
podcast
Joe
with,
was on a couple of months ago.
yeah,
Yeah.
with What's the Problem?
Yeah.
Um, and he brilliantly outlines what is the problem with our money today. Um, and money, lots of people like to say money makes the world go round. And if you're a business owner, you should be interested
Mm,
in that and looking at more of a fundamental why. Why is it getting harder to run my business? Why are things getting more expensive? Um, because that's that's not normal. That things are so we've got a target of 2% inflation each year.
mm,
Um, but then it's asking why. Why do we have that? And has that always been the case? And does it have to be the case in the future? And it's being able to look what could be in the future.
hmm
Um, and just when you were on my podcast, I think I named it staying curious
mm,
or asking why. It was along those lines. And I think that's so important as the world evolves that business owners, entrepreneurs, uh, innovative people need to be asking these questions and seeing where the world is moving.
mm,
Um, and Bitcoin is just one of these things
right.
that is changing the way that we live our lives.
Mm. Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. And as someone who's, in my case, been in business over 20 years now, it's I've just felt in the last few years it's almost imperceptible that there was a sense that something's not quite right.
Hmm.
We deal with, in my main wealth management business. clients, often very successful people, but I would have lots of conversations. A lot of the clients we work with are business owners, and none of us could quite put a finger on it. But we'd be maybe moaning and groaning about various things that are going on, whether it's the higher taxes or the cost of living or the cost of the challenge of recruiting and retaining people. And there's a whole bunch of things that were always felt to be, individual separate problems. And then the
Hmm.
more I thought about it, the more I sort of looked into it, I thought, well, maybe there's a common thread that
Hmm.
runs through it all. And which led me to explore this a bit further. And as I say, this podcast is all about providing, education, ideas, resources for those people. Running a business, as you are discovering right now, is hard enough at the best of times, right?
Yeah.
There's always headwinds, there's things that come at you in the normal course of business life. And the underlying issues and challenges around kind of financial issues, the money system, that's another layer of complexity within it as well, which led me on a personal basis just to want to be curious, learn more.
Hmm.
Is there something else that I can sort of maybe understand, which will help me personally and will help my business and our clients as well. So I came across the Bitcoin Collective. And
Hmm.
I mean, tell me more about the company, because it seems to me you're more into, it's like educational, just trying to help people, educate, resources, rather than try to sort of ram this thing down the throat.
Yeah.
This Bitcoin crazy maximalist that you see from time to time. But am I right? Is it more of a sort of a help and education process?
Yeah. I try and make Bitcoin as relatable as possible to people and meet people where they are, because it doesn't work if you go up to someone and say, you need to learn about Bitcoin, and just going in guns blazing on how the current financial system is broken. And because that's a lot for someone to
Mm,
compute, and uh, then having to process that. So, yeah, we are very much how can we meet people where they are, make it more credible. So, uh, at the top of our business, we are a media company.
right.
We run podcasts, newsletters, and Twitter or X
Mm,
Spaces,
yeah.
and overall our socials as well, putting out content and starting more events as well in the UK. But it's bringing, so for example, on my podcast, I've had people like, so Save the Children, the charity. They've actually they're piloting different Bitcoin projects within their charity because they're spending so much money um, on transferring the funds around the world.
Right.
I think off the top of my head, it's $65 million annually is what they're sending. So they're looking at how they could use Bitcoin to do
Right.
that and bringing in things that people know. Because when I say Save the Children, people know that.
Sure.
And then I say Bitcoin, and they're like, oh, those
Yeah.
two don't go together. Or
Yeah.
I didn't think they go together. But in fact, lots of these companies are actually looking at it.
Mm,
It's the same with, I've had people from Fidelity on the podcast, as we've seen Bitcoin become more
mm,
institutionalized. These names are just ones that people are familiar with.
yeah.
And how can we get these stories out to get people familiar with Bitcoin?
Mm,
Because it takes a lot of touch points with Bitcoin to actually say, okay, maybe I should look at this now. Um, I think someone once told me it was 7 touch points,
yeah.
um, until you actually are like, okay, we should look at this. So with the Bitcoin Collective, we're not in your face. We're about how can we make this relatable to individuals, but now businesses. So we've recently moved a lot more into helping businesses around why they should be looking into learning about Bitcoin.
Mm,
Because it, for me and other members on the team, is we've seen an exodus of
right.
entrepreneurs. I've seen you post a lot
Yeah.
about this actually. Entrepreneurs leaving the UK, and I actually see it like you see it in the numbers,
Mm,
but I also see it in like my life is
Sure.
I've got friends going to Dubai,
Mm.
people moving to Portugal.
Yeah.
Uh, it's very common now, and like also just closing down a business
Mm.
and potentially going to employment, which is sad because it's that business was obviously their passion
Yeah.
and it's what they, but it didn't work out. Um, so what we're now looking at is Bitcoin is the best performing asset class over the last 10 years. And we very much believe it will continue that into the future. So now we're seeing lots of businesses adopt Bitcoin into their treasury and just hold it as an asset. Um, and this is where we're now pivoting into is helping these businesses understand this
Yeah.
and take the friction out as well. Because it's one step understanding it, but then it's like, okay, well, how do I do
How do I
this?
even do it? Yeah, I really want to get into that and unpack that. That's going to be really relevant, I think, to the audience here as well. But if we could just sort of backtrack a bit and just, if there's we've all been on a journey. I've been on a journey, 7 touch points. I probably had 70 touch points just trying to, and I've pushed them away most of the time. But because I do retain a sense of curiosity, I'm thinking I need to learn a little bit more about this. So if you were to give like a 2 or 3 minute summary, Bitcoin is known because it's some crazy crypto thing that people talk about that seems to go up in value. It seems to be very volatile, but the returns are better than other things. That's just one aspect of it, right?
Yeah.
So if you were trying to just kind of tell educate a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old or something, what are the basic? Why would anyone, and particularly a business owner who's got enough going on in their life, why would they even be remotely interested? What before we get into the Bitcoin
Yeah.
treasury, but why
Okay.
is anyone interested other than, by all means, you can talk about the fact that it seems to have performed better than anything else. But why would anyone be interested to go to the next step and say, yeah, I'm keen to learn more?
Because this is a new technology. I think we need to strip it back to that is if you look at a lot of people relate it to the internet and how revolutionary the internet was. And Bitcoin's very similar, is the internet is a protocol.
Yeah.
Bitcoin is also a protocol. And if you look at the internet, it's allowed us to transfer information globally at no cost. Like I can message you.
Yeah.
I could be in Australia and I could message you. I could FaceTime you from Australia.
Right.
And that's what the internet has allowed us to do is bring us all together in this one communication system. But we still don't have a way of transferring value globally on a protocol, the same way as we do the internet. And this is what Bitcoin is. It is the value transfer on top of the internet. So I can send you something that's valuable from, let's say, El Salvador. I can send you the equivalent of £10
Mm.
in Bitcoin from El Salvador back to London. The only reason I said El Salvador is because I did a podcast, and live on the podcast we did a Bitcoin transfer, let's
Mm.
just say,
Yeah.
from London to El Salvador and then back again, and we did it in about 15 seconds.
Right.
And if I was to say, could you do that with
Mm.
traditional finance?
Yeah.
It would take days
Yeah.
potentially to do this, and then the costs incurred
Yeah.
on that on the FX as well. I dread to think what that would end up
Yeah.
being.
It would be expensive. So I get that global money transfer, equivalent of value transfer. Playing devil's advocate slightly, if I never send money to El Salvador or receive money from um, be, having a contrarian opinion,
Yeah,
I just literally this afternoon sent some money via Revolut to someone else in the same country, and it
yeah.
went through in a second. So, are you saying that this is one of the potential benefits? Is you can send value anywhere in the world. It's not solving massive problems on that specific thing as it relates to like internal UK
Yeah.
But that's fair, right? So
Yeah,
it's not, because
you
this is some of the things. And again, forgive me, I'm just sort of asking the questions that I used, had asked in the past.
yeah,
And people say to me, I don't have an issue with sending money. I can send it from my account. It goes the next second. So international is a thing for sure.
yeah,
Well,
and
there is for sure a lot of friction to this day and cost.
yeah, international, but also domestically. You're right. We don't in the UK anyway.
Mm,
We don't have a problem with payments.
yeah.
Um, yes, the merchant or the business actually has to incur quite heavy
Mm,
costs, um, from 1% up to probably like 8%. But all in all, we've got a good payments network.
mm,
But this is just in the UK. If you look globally, it's very different in
for sure.
different jurisdictions. But you're right in saying that the main narrative around Bitcoin at the moment is its store of value,
Yeah.
because there's so many different, as how you opened it is, there's many different ways to look at Bitcoin,
Mm,
and payments is one of them, but it's just not highlighted that much at the moment. But Bitcoin as a store of value
mm.
is very much the narrative at the moment, uh, because there is only ever going to be 21 million.
Right. This is what I wanted to get into. And again, forgive me, this is for someone who's been deep in the weeds of Bitcoin for years. We're going back a few. I
Yeah,
want to
no,
go.
this
I
is
want to go.
good.
I want to go
Yeah.
into the basics, because, and let's just explain it, because this is one of these things. Just from where I'm sitting as a kind of non-Bitcoin expert, that I never ever thought about, and it's worthwhile spending a couple of minutes on this
Yep.
concept of a finite supply of something versus an infinite supply of another thing,
Hmm.
which are both in theory the same in terms of store of value, um, transfer of wealth, transfer of value, etc. Tell me more about that, because there's a lot of people who don't have a clue about this. They just know that it seems to go up in value and it's volatile.
Hmm.
Tell me about the finite supply and how that differs to for every other type of sort of store of value that we've known up until now.
Yeah. Well, the main one that we've known globally is gold as a um one of the superior stores of value that has been used for centuries.
Mm,
Um, but when you look at gold, yes, it's finite on the earth, but we don't know how much is actually on earth. Um, because you'll see in the news every couple of months to years a new, or they've been digging for gold, and there's been a new, don't know what you'd call it,
mine or
and
sort of,
yeah, a new uh,
yeah, discovery
discovery. That's the
of
word
a
I'm looking for. Discovery of gold, and we keep discovering more and more. But then, if you actually look at, we're advancing as a civilization quite a lot at the moment because of technology that we're able to go off of Earth. And
mm,
there's actually a mission at the moment with SpaceX and NASA going up to look at, I can't remember the name of the asteroid, but it's got trillions of dollars worth of gold on it
wow,
currently, and
really?
they're looking at mining that.
Okay.
So now we're like coming out of the Earth to look at, okay, could we mine asteroids and bring that gold back to Earth, which then increases the supply of
Yeah,
gold drastically. If
yeah.
we're saying there's trillions of dollars worth of gold up there, then it means that gold actually loses its that store of value because you're drastically increasing the supply.
Right. So that's just a classic supply and demand type of thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
If there is like a lot of the supply of something, by definition, it must reduce the value of the thing if more and more of it gets created.
Yeah.
And I get gold and other things. It's not finite. There's more that can be created. And the thing that I'm thinking about as well is, the other, store of money or whatever it means
Hmm.
is pounds, dollars, euros,
Hmm.
what seems to be called fiat currency, which is a subject, a term I never really used before, but
Yeah.
now I hear it. That's just normal money as you and I would historically know it to be. And again, that grabbed my attention. And this kind of goes back to, because I'm old enough to have been working in during the great financial crisis
Yeah.
about 2008. and the various sort of things that have happened since then. The other notable crisis was the pandemic in 2020, and there were various things that happened at the time which have, clearly have an impact, and that's really around the supply of currency and fiat money. Just tell us a bit
That's
more about that, and I'm just trying to just get to the point of why is Bitcoin different, and why does it solve this
yeah.
this problem?
Um, so first of all, I'll bridge it with Bitcoin, comparing it with gold. Is
Yeah,
Bitcoin, you've got hard coded, or is this what people say? That's how you say it. I realize hard coded actually, if you're not used to Bitcoin, it probably doesn't make much
yeah,
sense.
yeah. Let's keep it basic.
Bitcoin is code. Um, that's what it
It's
is.
computer code.
It's
Is
computer code, and at the birth of it, it set out rules, and these are the rules that everyone's going to play with. And there's going to be a maximum of 21 million coins, and you can only change these by consensus, by everyone saying yes, we want to change this.
Mm,
So that is 21 million is the hard cap of Bitcoin, and this won't increase. But this is now, you're right. When let's go to fiat money now,
mm,
which a lot of people don't realize that fiat money, it just means that it's not backed by a commodity like gold or silver, or um, and then it's backed by government and
mm.
trust in
Yeah.
government. And this is a system that we've only been using since the last 54 years, since 1971. Um, and this is a fundamental thing to understand, is like, this system hasn't been around for that long. Like
Mm,
50 years is not that long. And we're just slowly now seeing the the destruction of it go exponential, because it's slowly been simmering away, and
mm,
the supply of money has been, the money has been getting printed. As if you listen to Joe's
mm,
episode, that's what his is all around. So that is the big problem with our money today, is the supply can be increased. And if you want good money, if you want sound money, hard money, it should be very hard to increase the supply, or not be able to increase the supply at all.
But the impact of continually increasing the supply, people say this money printing, but
Yeah.
it's creating
Creating new
more
money.
of it, new money in the financial system,
Yep.
and that leads to what? Inflation.
Inflation, exactly. So it it always makes me laugh when people say, oh, they complain about the price of something going up, which, to be fair, I probably do it as well, and then I have to check myself. But this is actually built into the current system
Yeah,
that we're living in. It's the central bank has got a target of hitting 2%
yeah.
inflation each year, which it doesn't meet most years. It's
Yeah.
usually over that. And it's only become evident with the events that you were saying.
Mm.
So 2008, and then you got the pandemic as well. And if you look, off the top of my head, I've got the stats on, at the start of 2020, if you had £100, that £100 today, the purchasing power of that would be £78.30. So that's happened in 5 years.
Wow.
That's how much you've lost in 5 years, which is actually, it's really scary that this is what I was brought up to do, was save in this currency.
Mm.
And I had a piggy bank when I was younger.
Sure.
If you have a piggy bank nowadays and you're filling that up for 5 years, you're losing whatever that is, 20,
Yeah,
20.
nearly a quarter, nearly
Yeah.
in 5 years.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's only the data that is getting released.
yeah,
Realistically, it's up towards 30%.
right.
You'll be losing over those 5 years in purchasing power. So now, like, saving, it doesn't really work in the currency that we've got
Yeah.
because it is losing value so fast. And this is why it's so important for people to understand why you need to save outside of this system. And when I say that, it's just it can be Bitcoin, it can be buying a property, it can be investing in equities. It's just getting out of that system of fiat to saving.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I was just thinking that before I came here, it's nice and sunny today in London. My wife had bought an ice lolly ice cream, and a Magnum ice cream. Other ice creams are available, but and she said, "Isn't this got much smaller than when the last time?" I said, "Yeah, that's kind of what they call shrinkflation."
Shrink,
But
yeah.
the point of me saying that is this it's just strange because it's kind of imperceptible in a way. We just have a moan and groan, as you say. Either the cost of that, well, last time I bought that, it was a bit cheaper than that, or isn't it smaller than the last time I bought it? So, but it's very subtle. It doesn't punch you in the face in the
Yeah.
same way. So it's just we have a little moan and groan and get on with our lives. But as you say, if you then step back from it, and even only 5 years, never mind 25 years or something, the money you've got, the pound, the dollar is just losing value, and you're working hard or building a business or whatever to be rewarded by this currency, this money, but it's actually losing value in real terms. And then there's all the knock-on implications, and going back to business owners and all, and businesses they're trying to scale, they're trying to generate profits and create enterprise value and stuff. But I guess all of them, or 99% of them, are doing that denominated in pounds or dollars or something. So this is where I want to get into the weeds now on this. So again, speaking to an audience primarily of SME sort of mid-sized businesses. And yeah, I can get on an individual basis why they might think, yeah, I should put some money into this Bitcoin because it seems to preserve my purchasing power ahead of inflation for my family circumstances. But I mean, speaking about a business, this is kind of different level. There's lots of moving parts in a business, and you've generally got you've got a team, you've got employees, you've got responsibilities, you've got tax reporting, there's a whole mess of complexity
Yeah.
within that, as you well know. But as I understand it, the Bitcoin Collective is really kind of going down this particular route in terms of helping support business owners to learn more about it. So imagine, and you are, I was going to say, imagine you're speaking to a business owner, but you are. But anyone tuning into this, a lot of them are business owners. Why would they, as it relates to their company or their business, even begin to explore this as a concept? Hi, just a quick pause. If you're getting value from this episode, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit subscribe and leave a rating or a review. It's honestly the best way to support the show, to help more people find it, and to make sure that future episodes get even better based on your feedback. Thanks for being here, and now back to the show.
Yeah. So it's, as we were saying before, is like you're already fighting an uphill battle.
Right.
When it comes to running a business, especially in the UK, and that's where our focus is helping SMEs in the UK learn about Bitcoin. That's the thing, is like, it's not saying that you should be buying it. It's okay, you should be learning about what is the problem. So if you're holding cash on your balance sheet for a large amount of, or for a long period of time, like we just said what was happening there over 5 years.
Right.
If you're holding it for even longer, like that number just goes crazy. So it's trying to make sure that business owners understand what happens when you hold cash on your balance sheet for a long period of time. And the example that I like to use, and I use with businesses, is looking at McDonald's, because it's a great relatable business to use that many people don't know that McDonald's is a real estate company.
Yeah.
Because
I've heard that. Yeah.
yeah, they've got nearly, last time I looked, it was $46 billion worth of real estate on their balance sheet.
Right.
And they've done that because they've got an asset there. and they've got an asset on their balance sheet which is appreciating over time, and they're not holding large amounts of cash in relation to that. They're still, compared to UK SMEs, it's a large amount. But that then means that they can last not decades, but they can last centuries.
Mm.
They're actually coming up to a century old business now because they're accumulating assets on their balance sheet. And it builds almost a financial moat around your operating business. So I like to think of it as a castle is your operating business, and
Mm-hmm.
that's your burgers and fries
Right.
when it comes to McDonald's. But then you've got this financial moat that protects you, that is real estate. But in our case, we're saying that, okay, real estate was good,
Yeah.
but there's actually a better store of value now. And you should be looking into learning about Bitcoin and what that does by holding that on your balance sheet. Um,
Right. I mean, that really makes a lot of sense. That's so drawing the comparison you say, and a great example. You know, a huge global business like McDonald's are smart enough to create another asset. They're not. I mean, I agree with you. They are a real estate business, but they're not known to be a real estate
mhm.
business. But behind the scenes, if you look at the company and the balance sheet, that's what's a lot of the value in the business. So they've protected themselves from that. So you're drawing the comparison. You're saying, and other people business, and I know some businesses do exactly that. Some
Yep.
small businesses, they own a couple of properties. They might own the property that they operate from, and that's to some degree a defense against it. So that's quite a nice bridge actually from that is property, and other people will own other things. Um, and you saying, but Bitcoin is an alternative that's worth going to the next level and at least exploring the pros and the cons against it. And I'm thinking, again, in my business, a lot of businesses that I know about, we do keep cash, and we always. I mean, I'm always quite defensive person. I always have always kept quite a lot of cash in the business, and I just accept. I know I'm getting next to nothing on the return, but it's
Mhm.
like, well, I didn't ever want to go and buy a property or anything else within the company. So it's just like it's a pain. It's difficult. You know you're losing money, but hey, what do you do? And of course, not only are you losing money from inflation, but the modest returns you're getting, and also, by the way, corporate bank accounts pay much lower interest
Mhm.
than traditional retail because there's a limited range of options for you. So, and all the banks know that. So you get paid next to nothing, and even the next to nothing you get, you still get taxed on as well.
Yeah.
So I've always known that I'm kind of going backwards in real terms, but hey, I've got liquidity, I've got access to money, and it's just I just have to put up with it. I think a lot of business owners have felt the same.
The
And one of the reasons that they don't maybe buy property or gold or whatever, even equities within the business, it's just another level of complexity. And that's not my business. I don't want to get involved in that. And if I hear you right, what you're saying is no, there is another alternative, which is perhaps easier to access,
mhm.
is more liquid and accessible without having to go and buy a whole chain of property or something to hold on your balance sheet. So just carrying that forward and just thinking about the typical business owner says, yeah, I've sitting with £1 million in cash in the bank and I'm losing money, but I've got to do it anyway. What's I mean, what it sounds to me, it sounds the next level of owning Bitcoin within my company and on the balance sheet. It sounds in theory I can get the benefits. It's hopefully it was going to defend my balance sheet against inflation and all the sort of negative impacts on that. But can you just explain what someone would? How do you actually do that? How can you
Yeah.
physically do it?
Yeah. But I just wanted to say there, it's because we go so far with the education on what Bitcoin is and
Mm,
how you can put it in your business and apply this to your business. But it's only with education that you build conviction in this thing, and you need the business owner to actually believe in this thing and understand what Bitcoin actually is. Um, because there's no point going to a business and they don't quite understand Bitcoin, but then they just want to buy it because Bitcoin is very volatile, and
yeah.
you need to understand that. Um, and you're also right saying that with Bitcoin, you can just buy tiny amounts of it. Like I could go and buy £1 worth of Bitcoin.
Right.
Whereas with property, I can't quite do that. So that's why we're seeing a lot of companies in the UK and around the world that are just dollar cost averaging into Bitcoin through their business. So they'll just set up a dollar cost average with an exchange, which is where you buy and sell Bitcoin. Um, and maybe it's £500, maybe it's 5,000, maybe it's 50,000, and just buy a little bit
Or
every month,
every month, just
or
drip
every
drip,
week.
or every week, just drip
Um,
feed it in from your cash flow, the money you've currently got in a bank, and just drip feed it into.
that's what that's what some people choose to do, and
Yeah,
it varies with business to
sure.
business. And that's the thing with this is it'll be different for each business. And if you need that cash, and you will need that cash within the next, or potentially need it within the next year, 2, 3, 4 years, like, then you need to be considering, is that the best option? Is with the companies that are coming to us at the moment, is we've got a large amount of cash that we do not need.
Yeah.
Um, and once we explain this is what happens to
Mm.
cash by storing it in fiat, then it's like, oh, okay, maybe we should be moving into something that'll store that. And then going on to your question now,
No, that's thanks.
was how do you actually do it?
Yeah.
And it's very different for each business, because you could just be a one-man band, and it's very easy. Then it's just setting up an exchange account, purchasing that Bitcoin, and learning about how do you store that, learning about how's it accounted for, what's the tax
Yeah.
implications.
Yeah.
And this is where we try and take that friction out of it for a business owner, is walking them through,
Yeah.
like, how does this all work?
So just explain again. Forgive the dumb questions, but this is like
Anyway.
back to basics. You say you buy Bitcoin on an exchange.
Hmm.
So I mean, what is that like a Hargreaves Lansdowne, or so you just got, like you can buy your ISAs and things like that? What would tell me a bit more about what you mean by an exchange?
Yeah, so they're typically where you buy and sell the Bitcoin, and usually we would show people a Bitcoin exchange where you can only buy and sell Bitcoin,
Right.
and not other cryptocurrencies or shares or anything else like that. There are companies that are set up and designed to only offer Bitcoin,
Right.
where you can buy and sell them, and it's not your Hargreaves Lansdowne, and
Right. Obviously,
um,
a very sort of specific
they're very
niche.
specific. And but then there are challenger banks in the UK that we're seeing now that are offering Bitcoin. Like, there are more banks out there available, but you can go onto Revolut,
Mm.
you could go onto PayPal, and you could buy Bitcoin on these two
In your
well-known.
corporate account.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, and yeah, they're options for people. They're not um,
Yeah, sure. That's not what you recommend, but
what we
that's something.
recommend.
Just something that struck me there. I've heard from some people, because I haven't done this at all, but I've heard some who have, or they've attempted to do, and they've had a lot of problems with their banks.
Mm.
With that's been your experience. If I bank with the mainstream, one of the sort of big banks, and I want to transfer, I want to buy Bitcoin on an exchange, whatever. I mean, I've literally heard of people being debanked, so we're going to close your account down. So is that your experience? That's your experience. I can tell by
Yep.
the answer is yes. And so that's the last thing you want running a business is the
100%.
debank. So tell us how we navigate that.
Yeah. And that's been a huge problem as an individual and as a business, over the years. When we tried to first set up our company bank account, we went through 3 different accounts, and none of them would give us would service us. They just said, no, we don't service anything that's
Well, you
doing
wouldn't
with
even open an
Bitcoin.
account for
We
you.
wouldn't
Well,
even open an
because of
account.
the name of your
Yeah,
company, Bitcoin Collective.
yeah.
Wow.
So that was a struggle,
Mm,
but now it's it is different now, and it's increasingly getting better. But that is the worry of a lot of businesses, is that it will affect their actual bank accounts.
yeah.
But luckily now, these these Bitcoin exchanges have something called e-money accounts.
Right.
So they essentially set up a bank account within your company's name. You get your own sort code, account number, and it's literally you sending money from one of your bank accounts to your other.
Okay.
Which this has solved that problem, because before it was you were sending the funds to the exchange bank account, putting
Right.
a reference number in there, which then would identify which account within the exchange is
Yeah. Yeah.
yours.
Yeah. Yeah.
But now it's just you're sending it from one bank account to your other bank account.
Mm,
So that solved that problem. But in the UK, we are still a little hostile towards Bitcoin. So it's knowing how to navigate that as a
right.
business, uh, because there's a lot of businesses that are, yeah, worried about,
Well,
rightly so.
businesses are definitely interested in this, and I've had quite a few conversations recently. But the number one thing in business, as I've often said, you protect the farm. The business is the business, and
Hmm.
much as Bitcoin or other things might be attractive, I'm not going to do anything that's going to jeopardize, the underlying company, or have me, have major problems with my bank. I might have debt with the bank. I might have a bunch of other things.
Hmm.
So the ability to sort of know what you're doing and navigate, I do sense it is becoming a little bit more. I mean, in my world, the sort of regulated business, FCA authorized, um, the FCA seem to be softening the stance somewhat on this thing. So if the financial services regulator is saying we are going to think about authorizing various investment products, then hopefully that whole thing will be less of a challenge in the
Yeah.
future. But in the meantime, whilst it does remain a bit of a challenge for sure, you know how to sort of get your way through all that
Yeah, we've
without
been there.
jeopardizing the.
Yeah,
You've
we've
had your own personal experiences on it,
exactly,
so
and we've learned from that, and we've we've walked other companies through this as
mm,
well, and it's just making sure, taking the friction out of it, giving people that playbook,
yeah,
of how do you actually do this thing,
right,
because there's been a lot of mistakes throughout
sure,
throughout, and it's just knowing what to do, and how to do it.
all right,
But to your point on the UK and regulation is, yeah, if you look over the pond to the US, they have freed up regulation when it comes to Bitcoin,
mm,
and they have actually established a strategic Bitcoin reserve,
mm,
um, which is very different to how we are approaching it in the UK, but we will follow suit.
we usually do,
Yeah, but we just lag behind
yeah,
by
a few years,
quite a few years.
yeah,
So it's what I say is it's almost like looking into a time machine when you're looking at what the US are doing.
mm,
They've gone full force with Bitcoin. I mean, a company establishing a strategic Bitcoin, no, a country establishing a strategic Bitcoin reserve is massive. And I didn't think that this would come so soon.
mm,
That's my sign that in the UK we are going to catch up within the next year or two.
yeah,
The FCA now has pressure on them,
yeah.
to release some of these products, and I'm sure the likes of BlackRock, Fidelity, Bitwise are all trying to get in the door of the
Well,
FCA.
they can see commercial opportunities for themselves, whether they like Bitcoin or not, for sure. The
Yeah.
BlackRocks of this world like the idea of selling more funds. Yeah, and that all makes sense. So, and I was just thinking as well, having had a couple of conversations recently with business owners, we do have a. You talk about, I never want to be political on this, but I just
Mm.
reflect conversations that I have. Um, when you might have cash in the bank, but if people take money, I was speaking to someone the other day. He's got quite a lot of cash in the bank, and he doesn't need it, but so he was going to, but to take it out to pay himself or whatever, again, is quite brutal on the tax front,
Hmm.
right, in terms of paying income tax or national insurance, the very dividend tax, a bunch of things like that. And so people will often just leave money in the company.
Yeah.
And so, and it's kind of this. I think this is the key point. If I really drill down, this is not designed for for your payroll at the end of the month, because of the inherent volatility, which
Yeah.
is definitely it's a part. People, so it's a feature, not a bug. That's part and parcel that goes with it. So it's not for short-term money that we're going to take that on the chin. That's cash. You're going to need to pay cash. Your bills will get paid in cash for the time being. So you're going to suffer that, but you're not holding on to it for very long. Is the point? So
Hmm.
inflation is going to have less of an impact
Yeah.
if you're holding on for a month or two. But money, you think this is a couple of years away, and actually I don't know when I'm going to need it, but I don't really need it right now at all. And this is the phrase that's been used. It's not something that was common to me, well, not at the sort of SME level. Treasury, having a treasury, to
Yeah.
me is just cash in the bank. It's a deposit account. Obviously, big, listed companies and what have you, they've got sophisticated treasury management for all their kind of liabilities and obligations, and in some cases currency risk and all that sort of thing. But replying, it seems to me that same sort of corporate rigor that applies to some of the, from McDonald's and all the major companies have got a version of this,
Hmm.
and most of them do have cash. Some will have bonds and gilts and various other instruments to manage this. And effectively, what you're saying is this is open to most of us as well now, regardless of what size, right down to sort of one man, one woman business, to in your mind to have we'll call it, a treasury policy, which you can allocate some or all of that towards this store of value called Bitcoin.
Yep.
That's what you're saying, and in doing so, you're preserving and protecting, and I guess you're increasing the value of your business. If the future trajectory of Bitcoin is anything like the past 10 years or so, that can provide a useful, underlying. It will enhance your enterprise value of your business, I suppose, rather than just say, I've got a couple of £1 million in cash on
Hmm.
the balance sheet. I've actually got a growing asset
Yep.
as well, a bit volatile, but it's certainly increasing in value. And if I'm planning, which a lot of the conversations I have in this podcast are around, if I'm planning an exit
Hmm.
5 years out from now, then this will, in theory,
Yep.
this will help support an exit valuation and a price.
Yep.
Is that?
Yep.
I'm interested to know if you've got any examples. Do you know, are there any sort of companies you've worked with, without necessarily naming names, unless you can do? Any success stories? Anyone who's gone through this and has been successful in applying a Bitcoin treasury policy?
Yeah, there's quite a few, and we'll be releasing quite a few more over the coming rest of this year.
Okay.
But I'll work down from uh, sort of looking at this. All really stemmed from a company called MicroStrategy, and they're named Strategy now. So the corporate treasury, a Bitcoin corporate treasury, really started in August 2020 when this company put 500 million of their cash into Bitcoin because their founder and CEO at the time said holding cash was like having a melting ice cube, and that value is just dripping away. So he moved it into Bitcoin, and that's then escalated to, I think this week they now qualify to be in the S&P 500. They were just a zombie company before. And now we've got lots of people around the world adopting this strategy. But that's on the corporate level. And what we're really interested in is bringing that down to your everyday business, your SME.
Yeah.
And one example is not one that we've worked with, but there's a football team in Bedford called Real Bedford, and it's run by a guy called Peter McCormack, and they run a Bitcoin treasury strategy. So they've got a football team, profitable football team, but they've also got Bitcoin on their balance sheet. Last time I looked, I think they had about 83 Bitcoin, I think it was,
Right.
which is sizable amount. But this is now enabling them to move up the divisions in football because they've got this safety net behind them. They are a profitable business, but they've also got this must be 9 million, however much it
Yeah.
is, um, behind them, and they're growing that.
Versus what they might have done is have some, I don't know what that would have been when they first started, a couple of £100,000 or something like that in cash, melting away like an iceberg. They took this club, and Peter took the direct decision
Hmm.
to say, I'm going to allocate to Bitcoin. The price has risen, and it's fueled the success, partially, obviously, as you say, a successful company or club anyway, but it would have helped and supported their ambitions.
Yeah,
That's
and
interesting.
that's what it is it's helping people's passions, really, is so you're not fighting against all these challenges that you have. It enables you to have a little bit more time and space to breathe, essentially, because you've got this asset that's growing on your balance sheet,
Hmm.
which means that your business is also growing, assuming that you're good cash flow, profitable. And we're seeing another example is uh like down to a online fitness coach, um very successful, multiple businesses, um but she's been allocating to Bitcoin for the last year and just dollar cost averaging in.
Hmm.
I don't have the stats on how much she is, or how much that's appreciated, but if we take, she's been doing it for a year, she, let's say $70,000, and it's now at $110,000. Um, that's significant on
Sure.
anyone's balance sheet. And we're working with people, just one man, one woman bands, up until like top tier sports teams.
Right.
It gets a little bit trickier when it's that level, because then you're having to educate a board
Yeah.
and the shareholders, and that's when you really need to tailor these discussions and the education around it, because you want everyone on the same page and understanding
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. I get that. And the way that I think about this now is, this has gone again. I'm late to the party on all this, but this has gone from being a bit of a, in my mind, a wacko crypto thing to being, I'm going to say, mainstream. If you got the largest economy in the world has got a strategic Bitcoin reserve, then it's kind of it's a real thing,
Yeah.
for sure. It's a significant asset class, and the way I think about it is, whether it's a large corporate or a small business, or a company or business that's got a board of directors, is, I think it could be argued that you're failing in your duty, your fiduciary responsibility as a board director, to not even talk about it.
Yep.
So, and this is what we're beginning to do in my companies. At least we put it on the table as a discussion point, with some thoughtful analysis, research, and just consideration of the whole thing.
Hmm.
The end result may be it's not for us for a bunch of different reasons, but we've fully considered it. And I think, well, any organization of any size, particularly if you've got shareholders, if you've never ever gone through that process, or you've dismissed it
Hmm.
without going through the process, I don't know. I'd question your fiduciary role as a sort of normal, sorry, a formal board director of a company. So I think there's a process that I think most organizations. I get if you're sort of a sole trader type thing, you're doing it, and you're
Yep.
improving your finances and your business. If you're a larger scale company, it just should be part of your board pack, your diligence, whatever you should
Yep.
be doing. Like there's so many other things. There's other risks that are looked at, and a risk in any company is the risk of this melting ice cube.
Hmm.
Is that our balance sheet is being dissolved, the cash at bank is losing value in real terms. So I think that's where I'm coming from. Again, I retain my sense of curiosity. I'm just thinking, I don't know where this is going to go for us or other people, but we've got to at least explore it. We've got to
Hmm.
start from this and at least document that we've looked at it, and either we've gone to the next stage, or it's just not for us at this moment in time. But these are the reasons why it's not for us, and I've got an audit trail.
Yeah.
Yeah, did that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And this is something I completely agree.
yeah.
It was 4 years ago, we ran a workshop with many financial institutions within the city of London. And we looked at exactly this, on why is Bitcoin not being talked about within these organizations? Because it needs to be analyzed whether this is a risk or if this is an opportunity or a threat. And unfortunately, at that time, the outcome of the workshop was that this is for any employee to raise this actually risks them moving up the ladder,
Wow.
um, which shows you how times have changed now. Now we are having conversations with some of these institutions, and Bitcoin is actually, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but we're now getting to the point where it's too risky not
Yeah.
to actually look at it. And then that's to your point.
That's what I think. I think the tables have turned a bit,
And
and you should be. And no one's saying you should adopt this. What I'm suggesting is you should explore it
yeah,
and then make a decision either way, but based on facts, evidence, and rigorous data research. But whatever is appropriate. I just think that's the rational
yeah,
stance to take right now. And the other thing that springs to mind for me right now, as you're saying these things, my brain's ticking over as usual, is I mean I know founders and entrepreneurs that I friends of mine and other people that I know and clients, and they're scaling, they're growing, and some of them are growing through acquisitions. There's
hmm
there's quite an active M&A process going on, and I'm just taking your real Bedford example. If you've had some money in the bank, because historically to make acquisitions, you've either got to have a lot of cash, but often they're funded through debt, and you go out and. But if you've got this balance sheet asset, which does seem to be accumulating quite significantly, that in theory can provide fuel for an M&A, a roll up, the
yeah,
ability to go out and buy one, two, three, four, five companies, and then as a consequence of that, if you know what you're doing, really get achieve some significant scale. So it strikes me there's a lot of different angles here. There's either one of it is just I just want to get a higher return than cash in the bank,
yeah,
and I might not put all of my cash, but to dollar cost average or pound cost average
hmm
into that seems a pretty rational thing to do. And then you've got the various other aspects, but the opportunity to improve that balance sheet at a faster rate than you're ever going to do otherwise, to then use for something else other than just we've got higher return. I can now use this to buy the property if I want to, or buy another business
yep.
because that is part of my growth. And if I'm thinking I'm going to exit myself in 7 years from now, but I can make a business 10 times bigger than I would do otherwise through organic growth. That strikes me as quite interesting.
It's super interesting. And this is one thing of you kind of need to approach it in, it's like a dual strategy
Mm,
almost that you're running, is you've got your operating business, but then you've also got your accumulation of Bitcoin, this asset on your
mm,
balance
mm,
sheet. And that becomes a really powerful thing as it appreciates and you add to that. This is what we're seeing play out within, on a corporate, on a public
mm.
company level, is we're seeing companies use the capital markets to accumulate Bitcoin for their treasury, but then they've got the intention of growing their operating business by buying up uh, other companies within that sector
You're right.
and growing it massively on that side as well. So that's the way I like to look at it, is like you're running a dual strategy.
Yeah.
And on a private level, it works very similar. In the example I gave, Real Bedford, they put a proposal to, there's two teams in Bedford.
Uh-huh.
They put a proposal to Bedford Town FC, I think they're called, to merge together.
Uh-huh.
I think that got rejected, but there's opportunity
Yeah.
once you have that strategy in place to grow your operating business as well.
It's fascinating. We probably need to wrap up in a minute. I could be talking to you about this all day long because it spins off various things in my kind of monkey brain about the opportunities that potentially can exist if we've got this.
Yeah.
And it goes back to this concept. We've got this thing called it's hard money. It's not eroded by inflation, and it tends to go up in value faster than pretty much anything else. So what does that
hmm
mean, especially if you've got some years that you can plan ahead for? I'm familiar with company in the UK called Smarter Web Company, SWC, who did this quite recently. And to my knowledge, they were, you know, a relatively modest website design company who IPO'd, launched, and that is, and they're still designing websites. That is their operating business, but they're now raising capital. Obviously, they IPO'd and listed and got capital through that, and now they're raising further capital, and they're using that to buy Bitcoin, like a mini strategy or micro strategy
Yep.
in the States. And it's, so you've got that in the UK, but then take it down to the you know, the daily small business.
Yep.
Within reason, you can apply your own version. I'm not saying people should go and list or IPO their company, but you could apply some of the same practices and disciplines to sort of almost get that rocket fuel that these other companies have used very successfully now for years,
Yep.
in Strategy's case as well.
And
So,
the key to it is understanding what that rocket fuel
mm,
is the big thing, because it sounds a bit ridiculous that if you don't understand Bitcoin, that we're saying, well, you just put this thing in your company and you hold it on your balance sheet and it'll do wonders.
yeah,
But
sounds too good to be true.
it does sound too good to be
Yeah,
true, and usually that puts people
for
off.
sure.
But people, you need to understand that this is a new technology just as revolutionary as the internet was. We are going through dramatic period of change, and money as we know it is changing faster than it's ever changed before. So that's how I just encourage people and would encourage people to learn about this. Like, maybe it does sound too good to be true, but it's not. Like, this is just a period of exponential change,
Mm.
and the status quo is, yeah.
Yeah, it's not going to stay. That's the truth. Status quo is kind of going, and things are moving fast. And again, sad to say on my part, I'm old enough to remember, and you're definitely not, life before the internet. You know, I mean, you kind of were probably just about born, but not much. And I remember, you know, early days of the late 90s, and the concept of like, having a website was pretty revolutionary.
Hmm.
Most companies, I mean, we were well into the early 2000s, and before website became just obligatory. And the concept of, you know, when the likes of Amazon and that came along, and you were supposed to put your credit card onto this thing called the internet, there's no chance I could put my credit card onto this spooky thing called the web, whatever. So people just didn't do it because it just sounded too bizarre.
Yeah.
And it strikes me as someone who's kind of, you know, lived in both that, this revolutionary changed everyone's life
Hmm.
called the internet as we now know it. And now you've got, as you effectively in a way refer to this as the internet of money. And there's early adopters, and in the same way as there was early people in the, I don't know what it was, the 70s or 80s or something,
Hmm.
on a very rudimentary form of the internet. And it evolved and it evolved. And it strikes me this is a similar thing. It's like the internet of money, right? There's things are changing, dynamics are changing pretty fast. And no one could have stopped the internet. You can't stop it. It's this
Yep.
network, it's a global network. No
Exactly.
individual, no government could say, I'm not having the internet. I mean, some countries tried, but ultimately you can't. And it just strikes me, I'm feeling echoes of all those years ago when the internet was a new thing, and there was a lot of pushback. There's a lot of people saying this isn't going to catch on, it's nuts, it's too risky, and you wouldn't put your credit card near it. Strikes me that it's very, very similar. So again, in that spirit of curiosity, I for one, and I'd encourage people who are tuning into this conversation just to explore it. If people want to learn more, and I'm sure a lot of people want to at least take it to the next stage and say,
Yeah.
look, can we have a conversation? What's the best way of getting in touch with you?
If you go onto our website, bitcoincollective.co, and you can fill out the form there and just reach out to us, and we will just then have a conversation. We are also running an event on the 21st of November this year, which is Bitcoin a competitive advantage,
Okay.
is what we've named it, because we believe that Bitcoin does give a business, an individual, a competitive advantage about learning about this thing early.
Mm,
It's like learning about the internet early, because this thing, although it seems like it's been around for a long time, like, this is still like the very beginning of
mm.
Bitcoin and this new technology. So, yeah, feel free to
Get in
reach out to
touch.
us and come to the event. It would be great. Learn about Bitcoin, how you can integrate it into your business. And we've also got podcasts, newsletters,
Yeah.
and just, yeah, start learning is what I would suggest. And we can help with all of that.
That's brilliant. That's right. And I know the Bitcoin Collective is just such a rich source of information, ideas, and the ability to connect with you and your colleagues and
Hmm.
just learn more. So, of course, we'll put links to all those resources in our show notes.
Thank you.
People just, go down and click the link and get in touch with you guys. So I think you're doing a great job for for businesses, SME businesses up and down the country. So congratulations and thank you for doing that. Last question. This is always going to be it's going to be a strange one for you. I ask everyone this question. You're early on your entrepreneurial journey. You are in this particular sector of a different, let's just call it a different type of money. But I always ask people about wealth and the concept of true wealth.
Hmm.
Um, Straight to the point. What is your definition of true wealth?
Yeah, I've been having a think about this one. Um, for me, it's time. Time is my definition of true wealth, just because, of course, I'm going to relate it a little bit to Bitcoin around time is the only thing that I see as more finite than Bitcoin.
Mm,
Because we've only got a set amount of hours, minutes, seconds on this planet. And that's the most important thing to me. And by using a form of money that allows me to free up more time in my life, and I can spend it how I want to spend it with family, with friends, uh, working on my passion as well, my hobbies. So, yeah, it's time that then goes into freedom, I guess.
mm.
They kind of are joined somehow. Uh, that's what I would say is my how I'd look at true wealth. I don't
That's
know if
that's
that's a good answer
that's
or
well,
not.
it's your answer, so it's definitely good. But it's interesting that and it's a brilliant answer. But you weave in, what you're saying is what I hear from what you said was Bitcoin enables that the time,
I,
the
I've no
time and freedom.
I've noticed that over the last 5, 6, 7 years is the more I move into just being on a Bitcoin, we call it a Bitcoin standard. It's essentially where you move most of your capital into uh, Bitcoin. Then that's allowed me more time, and I think that's how it should be,
Mm,
and it's allowed me to pick and choose where I spend my time. And I want more people to feel this, and yeah, this is why Bitcoin has become my life, and yeah, I'd have it no other way because that's my passion as well.
yeah.
Like, I wouldn't be running a business in this sector, in this industry, if it wasn't uh, my passion. So yeah, that's my.
Brilliant. That's a brilliant answer. And there's no better thing than your job and your business and your work is what you're passionate about, and you get up every day and you're
Yeah.
engaged and you're excited about the next day and what you're trying to do and what you're trying to build. I wish you all the luck in the world for the future for Bitcoin Collective. But for now, Jordan, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.